Okay, thank you. Welcome to Senate Education, Friday, April 1st, 1:33 p.m. Thank you all for joining us. We're doing a little bit of a I guess, in some ways, a bit of a cleanup day. We've had a number of bills on our wall related to, excuse me, my mask is on, military families and educating military students. Last year when they were on our wall, we were, of course, working on other things, but it looks like we have a vehicle in H517, the Vermont National Guard bill that was sent to us by the House. So we just thought it would be worth our while to have you all in on each of these. And I think probably the best way to do it is let's stick with each bill. And so we'll start with S104 and go in the order that is listed on the agenda. Secretary French, thanks for joining us.
Good afternoon. How are you?
Not bad, not bad. How are you?
Pretty good. So I'm Dan French, Secretary of Education. Would you like me to comment on S104?
Yes, please.
So I've provided written testimony on the three bills. So I'll just make some quick comments on it. We support 104. I think there's some areas that, I would say technical issues that we'd be happy to work on to clean up a little bit.
Okay.
But in general, we support the idea.
And those technical concerns, they were put in your written testimony?
Yes, things like, the idea of remote registration. I'm not sure it's a requirement currently that people register for school in person. Tuition for in-state purposes, if you are a non-operating district participating under this, the individual would also have the option to tuition out of state. So it's more or less purely technical in how we could situate this initiative in the context of our current statutory language.
Okay. Yeah, we'll have, I believe Tim Demaray was the drafter. We'll have him work with the agency a little bit on that, but appreciate your support. Is there anything else you want to say, Mr. Secretary, before we move to Mr. Fannin?
No, I can, I'll chime in on 105 and 517 when asked.
All right, thank you. Mr. Fannin, sticking with 104 for now.
Thank you. Jeff Fannin, for the record, Vermont NEA. And as Secretary of Education just said, we too support S104. I guess the thought is to add it to H517. So do support that and think it's a good bill. Rather simple. I have no written testimony.
Okay, if you could write that up for us, that would be great. April
Happy to.
Great. Let's see. Jay Nichols.
Good afternoon. I will give you a little written testimony afterwards for all three bills together. So S104, we support the concept of remote enrollment into public schools for a child whose parent guardian is being transferred under military orders, and moving the required residency paperwork to within 10 days of the student's actual attendance. We're fine with that too. As Dan said, there's some logistics that may need to be worked out. And in some places, it comes down to like maybe in small schools, secretaries not being there during the summer, some of those types of things where they schedule appointments. But that's stuff we can all work with. And we also agree with the other parts of the bill, even though they don't directly impact K-12 education.
Thank you. And Mr. Francis, any objections to S104?
Hi, Jeff Francis, Vermont Superintendent Association. I don't have any objections. I actually arranged for Superintendent David Young from South Burlington, who is Vermont's commissioner to the Interstate Student Military Compact, which is a role. So he had trouble receiving the link. He's going to speak briefly to all three bills. I've just sent him the link, but I will tell you that we do not have an objection to 104. He has some comments on it. So if you could commence with the next bill, and then when he gets on the Zoom call, which should be momentarily, he might have a comment on 104 at that time.
Okay. But you have no comments on 104 yourself from the Superintendent's Association?
No, when I spoke with Mr. Young this morning, he's well informed on this topic because as I said, he's Vermont's commissioner. So he had some observations, not in opposition to the bill, but it might inform the committee and the bill. So he ought to be on momentarily.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. S-105, Mr. Secretary.
Yes, Dan French again, Secretary of Education. We support S-105. My commentary is really, we did look into the initiative. Just call your attention, Vermont doesn't have a large number of military families like in the states where it has become a more common initiative like Texas and Florida. But we support the idea. The only point really from a substantive perspective I'd offer is it's not clear to me that additional rules would be necessary, and paragraph E references a requirement to develop rules on this. I'm not sure that would be necessary to implement it.
Okay. So noted. Mr. Fannin.
Jeff Fannin again for the record, Vermont NEA, and again, support S-105 as an option for schools to consider. So I think support the bill.
Yeah. Okay. Mr. Nichols, any objection?
No objections. Only concern on S-105, which I'm extremely supportive of, is our only concern is that if schools want to pursue this designation and the steps necessary to be deemed a Purple Star campus, is there going to be any type of funding available for them if they have to hire any kind of additional staff to help out with that? It's probably going to end up being somebody who's already employed by the school district, but there might be.
That was our
some kind of
impression.
stipend or
We were
something.
hoping we were hoping it might be somebody that just takes on the work.
Right.
And I don't mean to say that as if that's an easy thing to do necessarily, but that was some of our thinking around that.
Yeah, and schools might want to think about some type of stipend or maybe there's some funding source through the military too. I know with some of the guard work we do, there's sometimes some funding sources that are available there. Just something to be mindful of, that's all.
Okay, thank you. I don't see Mr. Young yet, so let's just move right now to H517 so we can let the secretary and others go. Mr. Secretary, 517, this is related, as you probably have seen, the Vermont National Guard tuition benefit program. We just want to make sure that, again, we're kind of checking all the boxes and have heard from folks. Anything that you want to say on this?
Dan French, Secretary of Education. No, we support 517.
Okay, Mr. Fannin?
Again, Jeff Fannin, Vermont NEA. We too support H517 as it came over from the House.
Great. Mr. Nichols?
100% support.
All right, great. Mr. Fannin, Mr. Secretary, and Mr. Nichols, thank you so much. We'll have Mr. Francis continue to join us as we wait for Mr. Young, as well as Marilyn Cargill to comment on this. Any word back, Jeff?
No, I'm not sure what's going on technologically. I will tell you that we do not oppose and in fact support those three bills. Dave
Okay.
Young have some good insights, I thought, that I'd like you to hear, but if he doesn't arrive, he doesn't arrive.
Okay. Has he sent anything to us, Jeff, written? I did not see anything, Jeff.
Yeah, no, what I can do, if he doesn't show up, and again, I apologize, I'll suggest that he offer written comments if he has them, to the extent that they're substantive.
Okay.
And if you want me to, I'd be happy to advance my testimony on PCBs while we wait to
Sure,
see.
why don't we do that? I'm just seeing that Mr. Fannin and Mr. Nichols and the secretary are still with us. Anything else from any of you at this point on any of this work? I don't want to keep you. I think we're okay. Great.
I just want to hang in here and hear Jeff Francis's testimony on PCBs.
Yeah, stick around. Happy to have
Thanks.
you stick around. Yep, happy to have you stick around. Okay. Okay. Why don't we then, Mr. Francis, since we have Marilyn with us, we'll stay on 517 for now, and then we'll move to PCBs. Ms. Cargill, great to see you.
Nice to see all of you.
So VSAC might have an interest in H517 related to the Vermont National Guard Tuition Benefit Program. Wondering if you would like to weigh in, if you have any questions, concerns, etc.
So for the record, my name is Marilyn Cargill, and I am the Vice President for Financial Aid Services, Marketing, Research, and Public Affairs for Vermont Student Assistance. Actually, VSAC's testimony on this Chair Campion is going to be very brief. We have reviewed this bill. We are in support of this bill.
That's what we love to hear on a Friday afternoon.
That was very complicated.
Yeah.
If you have any questions for VSAC about the bill or about the program itself, I certainly would be happy to answer those.
Committee, any questions? We have a bill added to our list starting at 2:45. So yeah, the sooner we can wrap up some of this, I think we're going to be okay. So committee questions, anything? Okay. Ms. Cargill, thank you very much.
Thank you.
David.
Mr. Young, nice to see you.
Yes, nice to see you again. Two
Yeah,
days in a
twice
row.
Yeah, 2 days in a row.
Yeah, so I in talking this morning with Jeff Francis, I know that you've got these bills in front of you related to the military, and I think they're excellent as well. I've had a chance to read them, talk briefly with Jeff.
David, before you even start, can you just introduce yourself and maybe say why in particular you might be interested in this? Give us your connection to this work.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, David Young, Superintendent of Schools in South Burlington. I also represent Vermont as the commissioner for the Military Interstate Children's Compact Commission, right? So a compact is in play in Vermont that really helps to ensure that students of military active parents coming to or leaving Vermont are protected with regard to kindergarten entrance age, graduations, those types of things. In other words, in simple forms, if you're coming to us from Oklahoma, where your kindergarten entrance age is not September 1, for instance, we don't penalize the student, right? So the compact prevails. We have compacts now in all 50 states, and it does very specifically regulate some of that. So I just was interested, and Jeff was obviously knowledgeable to kind of pull me into that. I also read information that Dan had put out, which I think was very, very appropriate. So I don't see any problem with it. I also ran it through our federal office as well, just any questions that they might have, and they too think it's all of them look good. Again, my only question to you would be, which, now I'll put my other hat on, right? Superintendent side, it's all about resourcing. So I don't know necessarily where resources are to support some of these pieces that do have a monetary need or a deferment monetary need. That would be my only question. I worry sometimes about, what is it? Where would that money come from?
Sure.
So that would be my only feedback, but in general, very positive, and I want to let you get onto your agenda. Thank you.
No, I appreciate that. It's a really good question, and I'm going to ask our committee assistant we'll dig in with the added in general and look at possibly, some, there might be military dollars there, or, something from, financial support from that end. I don't think it would be huge. I think we are talking about a stipend or a little additional money, but I appreciate the question. Senator Hooker.
Just a question about the population. We talked about not having very many military families. Do you have any idea of how many kids there are in the schools that would fall into this category?
Yeah, so for instance, this year, about 10, I've dealt with about 10 students that moms, dads, and guardians have had questions, right? So they've been deployed on active duty orders into here. So, we're not like a Texas, right? Again, I was prior military. You're not like a Fort Hood, or where you have many, some of my fellow colleagues that are commissioners in other states have much more activity. That being said, every child's important, as I know you know all. We've had a fair amount of activity with the Air Guard. F-35s, of course, have brought a lot of folks into Vermont on orders, and some of them have been accompanied with families. So we've had some of that, but by and by, we're pretty small. I do think, again, my desire is to make sure anyone on deployment, whether they're coming in or going out, understand kind of the rules, if you will, of the compact, right? We don't want kids to start kindergarten here in South Burlington, for instance, and then go to Oklahoma and say, oh, you got to start over again, right? Or vice versa. And we've been trying hard to get orders within the orders themselves, is to get information on the compact. But the best we can do right now is to make sure everybody, including you all, know that we have a compact, and we really are trying to be sensitive to the military family who has children coming with them, to make sure their children aren't put at a disadvantage, whether it be kindergarten or graduation and anything in between.
Thank you, Mr. Young.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Young?
Can I say something?
Yes, please, Senator Lyons.
I don't have a question. I just have a hello. It's good to see you.
Hi, Senator Lyons. Good to see you, and Senator
And it's
Chin,
gonna-
too.
It will be a big loss to have you not sitting in the superintendent's chair.
Yeah, well, I'm going to be a strong advocate for whatever is needed along the way, and care a lot about the state, and care a lot about education, and appreciate all the work that you folks have done, including my colleague on the line too, Jeff Francis, who's been a steadfast rock for us. So yeah, thank you.
It's good to see you.
We'd love to have you in before things wrap up. Almost, this committee is thinking possibly about almost, there are a number of key people leaving the state this year, superintendents, principals, teachers. We benefit if we could have a bit of an exit interview, if you will. Just to understand your time here, what kept you here, what got you here, and also, why it's time to leave. And any insight you might provide us with would be very helpful. So
Yeah,
we'll send an invitation, and it'd be great to have you with us.
Certainly happy to do it. I've been 32 in the system, and
Yeah.
got some military there too, which is why I'm talking to you about this today. So anyway, thank you for your time, and thank you for your effort, all of you.
Thank you. Great. Okay. Committee, any questions on anything related to, as you can see, H517, just trying to chart a course here. We'll have S104 attached to it and S105. This is this military bill, if you will. It'll also have language that Senator White has shared with us regarding the added in general. It'll also have the added not only the qualifications, but it'll also have the election date, which will be the second year of the biennium for electing the new added in general. I'm hoping that we can vote this out next week. So continue to raise questions or concerns before we do so, probably Wednesday first.
Senator Perch's got a concern here on the agenda.
I'm really glad to see that, because I want to get 727 done this week, so we just go into next week. So
Thank you. So yeah, if you just take a look at the agenda, Senator Hooker and Senator Lyons, it was because Senator Chittenden has some conflicts. You probably saw that we are going to go right until 6 o'clock to finish 7:17, if that's okay with you. It's only,
Can we send that for pizza?
it's only a 4-hour commitment. The one we were really waiting to see is how this one would respond.
Well, it's the first thing I noticed when I sat in my chair.
Hey, I had said we were gonna stop at 2:30, but now it's,
You're missing a bit of an April Fool's joke. We put a 6 p.m. agenda or adjournment on there, and I'll continue to walk through H727, a House bill. They're loving it. Look at them. At least David's giving us a smile. Mr. Francis, you ready to come back and talk PCBs?
I sure am, unless you'd like to have me come back at about 5:45.
Nope. I think we've had a long
Yes.
week and we would
Just
welcome
enough.
an early adjournment if we can pull it off. So PCBs.
Okay, thanks. I hope my audio is working well. I see that
Yeah.
Superintendent Young has stayed on, which I appreciate. He may be the leading superintendent on facilities issues, so it's good to see that he's here to listen to what I'm going to say. I've provided you with written testimony, and I will be brief in covering the points that written testimony addresses. I want to start by saying that nearly after the time of adjournment for the first half of the biennium, I've been in touch with principally the staff at the Department of Environmental Conservation, Commissioner Peter Walk and Patricia Coppolino, both of whom I know that you know and have heard from. I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the collaborative approach that they have taken in terms of preparing this sampling program, both the scientific methodology, the work that they've done with the consultants that are going to work with schools on testing, and also the methodology that they have determined with regard to how to roll out the sampling program. And I'll talk about that in a minute. So they've been just stellar to work with. I was sorry to hear of Commissioner Walk's impending departure, but I didn't want the moment to pass without acknowledging that. Similarly, we've had good working relationships with both the Agency of Education and the Department of Health in their respective roles. And several weeks ago, because I've sort of had the lead on this for the education associations, I hosted a meeting with Commissioner Walk, Secretary French, Dr. Levine, the staff persons from their respective agencies who were lead on this initiative. And I brought them together with leaders from VSA, the School Boards Association, VPA, the business managers and facilities managers, just so that we all knew what was happening before the sampling program started. And at that meeting, we spent a lot of time with DEC in particular, talking about, again, how they had determined what the order of school testing would be, the logistical challenges that they were confronting, and I would say addressing, and also, and we were really appreciative of this, their intentions with regard to technical and communication supports for schools through the sampling procedure, but I would say more importantly, if actionable levels of PCBs are identified. So both Commissioner Walk and Trish Coppolino talked about the fact that if and when PCBs are identified at an actionable level, they're really planning to support schools on the science, on the technical elements of mitigation and remediation, and also in communicating with school community members and members of the community at large around what is likely to be a very impactful event if a school is identified with PCBs. And it was through that process that I came to understand quite well why they would ask for the 2-year extension. And when I considered the request for that extension and conferred with my board of directors about it, who they also met with, by the way, we think that the extension makes sense, will make for a better program, and significantly, and this is very important to note, it is not going to delay the start of PCB sampling. In fact, the methodology that DEC is using basically ensures that the schools that are most likely to have PCBs, and we hope that they don't, but that are most likely to have PCBs, will be tested first. Also, their methodology includes information that they've gathered around HVAC work, other school facilities efforts, whether or not there are lower grades in the school. So they've really done great work in designing this program, I believe. And when you look at all of that in total, it makes sense to back the deadline up 2 years, but not impede what I would refer to as the pace and logic of the sequencing that they're going to employ to get the work done. So it's a long-winded way of saying, I think they've been very thoughtful in terms of what it's going to take to get this done and done well. And we very much support and join DEC in the extension, knowing that presumably the most important schools are going to get to work on this right away, as in within the next number of weeks. I talked to Trish Coppolino this morning. She showed me the draft schedule, the schools that are participating, how they're assigning both the staff at DEC and the testing consultants, and it makes sense to me. So that was the first part. Second part is actually simpler, I think. We are very aware that to this point, the General Assembly has not allocated any funds for mitigation and remediation. We know that school districts have not budgeted, nor do they have contingencies for what we have to regard as unpredictable and unanticipated costs should PCBs be found. And we know that in some places they will be found. In the absence of any funding, what that means is that when PCBs are identified, what is planned as a timely and well-organized response is going to be impeded over funding considerations. So I think that the testing protocol, the technical support from the Department of Environmental Conservation, the communication support is all going to be interrupted if people are looking around wondering how this is going to be funded. So our request is that the General Assembly act to address the funding issue this session, and that the establishment of a funding source coincide with the start of the sampling implementation. You know, I think it could be an allocation of funds that represents a commitment because of the way the program's going to be rolled out. But it is very, very important, imperative, I would say, that that a funding source be identified and a funding commitment be made. So those were the comments that I wanted to share with you this afternoon. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I think it's safe to say the committee agrees around the funding source, and we are in conversations with our colleagues in appropriations about just that. Senator Chittenden.
Mr. Francis, thank you. That was the best articulated reason for delay I've heard yet, and I really support how you framed it and also how you outlined which schools will be prioritized to have a reasonable approach looking at the schools with the greatest risks. I also appreciate your second point, and where my mind goes to is testimony earlier this week from Graham Campbell about the $96.2 million surplus in the Ed Fund. It seems very rational to me that the excess money collected from the Ed Fund be dedicated to some part to meet the needs of our school infrastructure that has, I think Superintendent Young will probably testify to some extent, has been deferred for too long and is almost at a critical nature. So I, as one member of this body, think the $96.2 million needs to be on the table to address these PCB concerns.
Other questions for Mr. Francis? Senator Pursley.
Mr. Francis, do you think there's any concern about I don't know, maybe delay isn't the right word, but the extension of the deadline just for those other 2 years, that some school that might have PCBs, that the parents of those children wouldn't know that they were in that school?
That's a very, very fair question. Based on the work that I know of that's happened at DEC, they have done a good job in scheduling the schools in an order that would represent greatest to lesser risk. So I think that's the right approach. I also think that the challenges that could arise, practical, risk associated, logistical, would be more problematic if DEC was forced to try to do this in 2 years when it legitimately is going to take longer than that. So when I spoke with Trish Coppolino this morning, I looked at, the number of staff that DEC has dedicated to this. I looked to the number of consultants that they're working with. And I said, what would happen if you lost a consultant or 1 or 2 staff members and the whole thing gets thrown out of whack? The other challenge, and they could speak to you about this if you wanted them to, is that they've built into the schedule a predicted amount of time for when PCBs are identified, right? So this is very different than this just going out and testing, getting the testing results and handing the testing results over to the school. This involves a series of steps that are pretty complicated logistically. For right now, what's 313 schools, it's going to be more than that. So I think that it would be really good policy for the General Assembly to say, okay, we want you to get it done on the earliest possible timeline, but we're going to give you until 2026 to do it in an orderly way so that nothing gets rushed and everything gets done well.
Yeah, I'm not really buying it yet, but I'm still open to listening, and we're going to have some medical folks in next week to talk to as well. I'm open, but Senator Hooker, please.
Thank you. Mr. Francis, you talked about the possibility of losing staff or consultants. Suppose there was a possibility of adding staff and consultants. When we talk about funding, maybe some of the money could be put towards that. Would that make a difference in moving process?
Right. Thank you for the question. I don't want to speak for DEC, and I very much appreciate Senator Campion's point. What I'm telling you is that from my vantage point, based on the information that I have, the approach that DEC has developed and the timeline that they're asking for makes sense. So, I mean, you can ask them to come in and demonstrate that to you. So I had not asked for it wasn't, what Superintendent's Association didn't show up first and say, let's get an extension. What I'm telling you is in the over the course of the last number of months, when I've been watching DEC develop this plan, I'm impressed by the thought process they've employed and the logistical mapping that they've done.
Senator Lyons. Okay, I appreciate that, and we will hear from DEC again. Senator Lyons has a question.
So I don't know whether we've heard this information or not, but from your perspective, do you have any idea of the numbers of schools, the numbers of schools that will be affected, and perhaps this is an AOE question, so those that have been built before 1979, then B, a total cost assessment for first the investigation and then an estimate for capital needs after assessment? And I know that that's almost nearly impossible, but has anyone even attempted to look at a total cost of correction? So I'll just ask that because it seems to me that if there are some schools that are significantly affected and they cost a lot of money or not, we should set aside some funds to work as quickly as possible, regardless of what the rest of the timeline looks like.
Right. So the answer to the first question about the cost of sampling,
or just no, the numbers of schools that are effective that were built before 1979, 77, 79.
When I talked with Tris Coppolino this morning, the timeline and the spreadsheet that they're working from this morning had 313 schools on it.
Right.
So,
Okay, yeah, okay, and was it, go ahead.
and there's not there are no predictors yet that I know of for what the mitigation and remediation costs might be. And I think that actually that lack of information, and they may have some calculations, which I'm not aware of, actually, I would say is a secondary interest on the funding piece. Because, you know, I don't think at this point we know how much it's going to cost. But, you know, they will be better, it goes without saying, better prepared to answer these questions than I am, because it's their program. And you know, as I said, they've done a lot of work on it.
Senator Chittenden. No, you're good. Okay. Anybody else right now? Mr. Young, did you want to weigh in on this?
Well, I'm sure I want to be timely here. I agree with everything that Jeff indicated. I can't stress enough, though, how important your work and your direction is. I'm certainly biased to education, as you are, as senators in representing education, but I worry greatly about the economic engine of education having to falter. And a great example is Burlington. You know, in your largest city, you shut down a school because of PCBs. The risk factors here are very, very high. And so I think a funding plan is needed, you know, immediately to some of the things that you've already shared. I also think that it's important that you not forget about lead and asbestos. I think facilities, a responsible facility plan is absolutely critically needed as well. And I do think that, as indicated, prior to 1979 was a very dirty period. I don't know what available records you have, but I would think first out of the gate would be, what are the facilities that are pre-1979, and be able to approach those from that perspective. Because we cannot afford to have another couple of schools like a Burlington have to be shut down. We'll have a major, major economic problem in the state of Vermont if we can't support the education or people coming to Vermont. Thanks.
Thank you for that. Any questions for Superintendent Young? Okay, thank you both. We appreciate it. We're going to hear from DEC next week, as well as some physicians and other health professionals, and we'll see what the House sends us, and we'll go from there.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks. Good to see you again, David. Okay. So we have, do you want to let, is Ms. Faust here?
Yeah, she is
Okay.
trying to.
Okay, great. So Senator Kitchell knows that we're interested in this issue. They know that this, I represented it as a priority to make sure that there's funding there. And so Stephanie, as well as sort of our liaison to that committee, Phil Baruth, are also copied Senator Westman, because he does a lot of health and welfare stuff historically, I think, on approaches.
Yes.
Yeah, so just so that they all know that hopefully we can put some money aside to deal with this.
We have to.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at 313 schools, and there have to be some that are really right in smack dab in the middle of PCB
territory. I know.
Yeah. And they ought to be able to tell us that.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that are prioritized.
Sure, and start that.
Sooner than later.
Yeah, and we're gonna have Capolina in next week also to talk about this and get a sense of where they're at and how they're gonna move forward.
I just wonder how much of the scheduling is based on, you know, how how much staff they have available. And is there
Sure,
a
Peter
possibility?
did say that they were having some staffing issues. And
Well,
we've
yeah,
also heard that
everybody
everybody
is.
is, even though
Everybody
there's
is.
money there.
Yeah.
I think
I
Matt
understand.
Chapman, an agency of Natural Resources, said he's looking for 5 people right now.
Yeah.
Coaching situation caused a lot of people to decide to retire.
Yeah.
Didn't we just fix it?
So at least to stem the tide.
But, yeah, and that's why, the other thing before we go to Ms. Faust is I'm really excited because we're hearing from Colin Robinson next week on teachers and how to sort of help with that shortage. Yeah, these workforce things are huge, but if ever you know someone who wants to move into the world of state government, I think this is just an incredible time.
Yeah.
So, okay, Ms. Faust, thank you for joining us. Just to tee this up so everyone in the room knows why you're here. This is, you work for adult education and literacy through the Literacy Network. And there is a funding appropriation request that is before the Senate. The House has moved in some direction on this. And so in our conversations, as we compile our requests, our list for the Appropriations Committee, we thought it would be important to hear from you. So the floor is yours, and looking forward to hearing from you.
Great, thank you very much. For the record, I'm Michelle Faust. I am a resident of Irisburg, and I am the Executive Director of Northeast Kingdom Learning Services, commonly known as NEKLS. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to present to you today on behalf of the Vermont Adult Education and Literacy Network in regards to our fiscal year 2023 request for additional funding. There's a slideshow that you all should have access to.
Yep.
Okay. So if you go to slide 2, you should see a map. Okay. Our network is comprised of the 4 adult education and literacy providers in the state, which includes Central Vermont Adult Basic Education in green, Northeast Kingdom Learning Services in yellow, the Tutorial Center in pink, and Vermont Adult Learning in blue. As you can see, the AEL network providers serve the entire state and are able to serve students regardless of where they live in the state. Our request is for an additional $1.4 million for FY 2023 to cover operational costs. As a network, all 4 AEL providers took time to dig into our individual budgets to determine the funding we would need to be able to cover all operational costs for FY 2023. Through this
So, Ms. Faust,
process,
it's unclear. Are you looking for an additional 700,000 from what the House put in, a total of 1.4?
yes,
So an additional 100, an additional 700,000.
yes.
Okay, Senator Terenzini.
Yeah, that was my question. 700,000 sounds better than 1.4.
Right. Yes, thank you. Go ahead.
Absolutely. So the 5 cost categories that are in need of additional funding support include staffing salaries and benefits, technology needs and software upgrades, hardware, textbooks, supplies and other instructional materials, outreach and recruitment, and property maintenance and services. It is important to note that the House included $700,000 in one-time funding for the AEL network in its 2023 budget. However, it is also important to note that the $1.4 million is a real number that was identified through our individual and collective work, and that we came to that number prior to the latest inflationary spike. Also, the additional $700,000 beyond the House recommendation would mean that any student who walks through our doors and at whatever level of need they present, that we are confident we could serve them and fully meet their basic academic, credentialing, and career readiness needs. Next slide, please. Like many organizations and employers in Vermont, the AEL network's operating costs have risen and are expected to continue to rise. In our initial response to providing remote learning options, we had to quickly upgrade technology and network systems, provide students with access to laptops and increased internet bandwidth to accommodate teaching students using Zoom and other internet platforms. While these upgrades were immediate responses, there is more work to be done to assure that we have a robust technology system to meet all of our students' needs. Upon reopening to in-person instruction, we were faced with the needs for masks, sanitizers, and increased janitorial services and air purifiers. These needs have continued as COVID cases continue in our communities. We are already feeling the effects of increased heating and supplies costs due to rising fuel costs. To respond to the loss of revenues associated with the pandemic, we all had to reduce expenses to continue to be able to provide services. However, we are as lean as we possibly can be and still be able to provide a level of high quality services that our students require and deserve. We need additional funding in FY 2023 to be able to fill vacancies because of the budget cuts and to hire additional staff as our student numbers are increasing. We also need to increase wages to be able to attract new staff and to retain our teachers who, due to level or near level state and federal funding for years, have not received adequate pay raises. We are having to compete against higher wages available in other educational sectors in Vermont, and we need to be able to be competitive to retain our workforce so that we have the necessary staff to serve the Vermonters that need our services. We know that there are many more Vermonters who need our services, and we cannot reach them without funding to support robust outreach and recruitment statewide. With more students, the needs for additional textbooks, supplies, and other instructional materials comes as well. Your support in providing our request for an additional $700,000 over the $700,000 that the House has already put into the budget will ensure that we can adequately serve and reach more Vermonters and help them to build the assets they need to move out of poverty successfully, as well as build the confidence to move forward successfully as family members, citizens, and workers throughout their lives. Next slide, please.
So let me just pause there for a moment. Are you turning people away right now? Is that,
No.
if you say more Vermonters?
Yeah.
You're talking
No.
about an expansion? Go ahead.
Yeah, we are not turning students away. What is happening is, though, that more students are presenting with higher levels of need.
Okay.
And the higher level of need has a higher level of cost to serve.
Okay.
The 2019 Community Survey of the U.S. Census estimates that there are 36,000 out-of-school Vermonters without a high school credential. Statistically, this is our most vulnerable population, facing generational poverty, unemployment, and both food and housing insecurity. AELN is the first and only stop for these Vermonters to get that most important asset, a high school credential. A high school credential will open up jobs, earning potentials, and the ability to take advantage of free college and career training programs that are being offered in the wake of COVID. AELN students gain assets, obtain jobs, and many go on to college and career training. Our investment in this particular demographic through adult ed and literacy truly changes lives in individuals, families, and our communities. Next slide. We know the numbers. They tell us there are 36,000 Vermonters out there who need our services. Annually, we report to the state the number of students served, the number of students who receive a high school diploma or GED, and more. But the most important thing for us to remember is that behind every number is a person, a Vermonter, who has goals and hopes and dreams for a better future, and they come to us to help them realize those goals and dreams. They come to us seeking a variety of services, from basic skills instruction in reading, writing, and math, to computer and financial literacy education, English language learning, and U.S. citizenship preparation, earning a high school diploma or a GED credential, for transition to career and college services to make sure that they are ready to be able to be successful in a CTE course, a college course, or an apprenticeship program. Every number is a person like Pcbs. Pcbs is pictured in the bottom right corner of this slide. Pcbs dropped out of high school in Jamaica in 9th grade when she got pregnant. As a single parent, she worked menial jobs to provide for her daughter. She met a Vermonter, got married, obtained a green card after almost 2 years, and moved to Lamoille County. She came with the American dream, but it wasn't for her, it was for her daughter. Here, with little education and few skills, she worked in housekeeping to put her daughter through college and then a master's program. Her daughter is now a practicing mental health counselor here in Vermont. Once Pcbs' American dream for her daughter was realized, for the first time in almost 30 years, she could think of herself and was able to formulate her own American dream. Her first goal was to get her citizenship. She went to Central Vermont Adult Basic Ed for both citizenship and English language learning. Pcbs and her daughter actually became citizens on the very same day. Her pride when speaking of it is palpable. The next steps of, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead, sorry.
The next steps of her American dream were a high school credential and an industry relevant credential that would lead to a career, something that she could have never imagined in Jamaica. In May of 2021, Pcbs, with the support of Central Vermont ABE, received her diploma. And as part of her high school completion program, she also obtained an LNA license. She now works in a care home doing what she loves. Her life has truly been transformed. And although she credits adult ed and literacy as being a miracle, we know that it's because of her hard work and the fact that she had access to Vermont's adult education and literacy services. Pcbs had goals for her family, her academics, and for her career. Through her determination and CVAB's support, she was able to realize them. In her time at CVABE, she was in every program that AEL offers, from citizenship to high school credentialing. Every one of our students across the state has a story with histories, with goals and pitfalls along the way. So many like Pcbs have changed their lives through our programs. Next slide, please. With an additional investment of $1.4 million for the adult education and literacy providers, Vermont could extend regional workforce expansion, paid work-based learning and training with a population that is already here, and that the state is already investing in through social support programs such as Reach Up, CTE, and free tuition. By investing more funds in the adult education and literacy providers, you will be leveraging the adult education and literacy system. Next slide, please. Vermont has a prosperous economy. Vermont's families are safe, nurturing, stable, and supported. Vermont's children and young people achieve their potential. These are the state population level outcomes in statute. They are the guidepost for where we want to be as a state. The vital work that the adult education and literacy providers perform is a crucial piece in helping the state towards realizing these outcomes. Next slide. Between 2017 and 2021, AEL providers served over 10,000 Vermonters. These students came to us for many different reasons and had many different kinds of success, from improving their skills to obtain a job or a better job, to earning a high school diploma or a GED, to achieving a certification or a credential for a job, to deciding that college was not only an option for them, but a desire for them, to new Vermonters improving their English language abilities so that they could apply their skills and education from other countries to careers right here in Vermont. Over those 5 years, the average cost per student served by the adult ed and literacy providers was a little over $3,000. That is a huge return on investment. 70% of students that came to us, students come to us from at all skill levels, from no literacy or very low literacy, all the way through middle school and high school literacy levels. We are much like a public school system in that we have a range of levels. 70% of students came to us with no high school credential, and they came in at varying levels of literacy. 16% of those completed in that 5-year period. Others are continuing to work on that goal. For some, it can take only a year or so. For others, it can take 3, 4, and sometimes 5 years, depending on skill levels and life circumstances. While they were in our program, roughly 700 obtained an IRC, earned a credential, or entered a post-secondary job training program. Keep in mind that these people would likely have never been able to do so if not for the AEL system and the services we provide. Although we do not have the data, we do know that there are many more who likely obtained their industry recognized credential or college degree after they left our services. We also had close to 1,200 English language learners in our program. Through their work with the AEL system, they were able to begin to assimilate into American culture, to communicate with their children's teachers, to obtain employment, to utilize advanced degrees from their countries of origin, and to become contributing members of our economy. As we know, Vermont is actively seeking new refugees, and adult education and literacy will be on the front line of providing English language and citizenship skills needed for their lives here. Next slide. Petigay's story that I shared with you is but one of thousands, and there are goals, dreams, and new stories yet to be realized for the 36,000 Vermonters that do not have a high school credential, and you can help to be sure that those stories can become reality. We ask that you support our request for an additional $700,000 over the $700,000 that the House has put into the budget for operational expenses for FY 2023. I want to thank you for your time for listening to this presentation, for supporting Vermonters who need our services, and for supporting the Vermont Adult Education and Literacy Network. And this time I'd be more than happy to try to answer any questions you may have.
Senator Terenzini.
Thank you, Michelle, for your presentation. I thought it was really compelling, and thanks for all the work that you and your colleagues do. I was just going to mention that Senator Hooker and I are going to be speaking, I believe, early next week with Chris Attori, the director of the Vermont Adult Learning Center in Rutland, and I'm assuming he wanted to talk about the same thing that you're presenting to us today. So seems like a worthy cause. So,
Senator Perslick.
Yeah, thank you for the work and the testimony. What is the funding source now for, like, what's the ongoing annual funding? Does it come through which agency?
So we receive our funds from the Agency of Education. There are 3 grants that we receive. One is an adult basic education grant. One is adult diploma funds, and one is federal funds from the federal government. Additionally, we have a fee-for-service program that we're able to access.
So what's your total budget before this $1.4 million request? What are you receiving now annually from the agency from those 3 grants?
I can only speak to NEKLS. I don't have the numbers for the entire district the entire state right at my fingertips. But I can get those, I can send those as soon as we're off of here to let you know what those numbers look like.
That would be great. And the other thing, would you also send us, I'd be curious, how many students earned a high school diploma or GED or a certificate last year with you? That would be a great number to have at our fingertips.
Okay, and our fiscal year runs.
Please,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
Our fiscal year runs from July 1st to June 30th.
Okay.
So I'll be reporting the numbers from July 1st, 2020 to June 30th, 2021.
Okay, Senator Hooker.
Thank you. Thank you, Michelle. Can you speak to your workforce and how well staffed you are? I know everybody's having problems finding people to do the things that need to be done. Do you find that, especially with the increase that you're seeing? What have you done about your workforce?
Yeah. So we had to, going into this fiscal year 2022, we had to do some pretty major budget cuts. And we did have several staff that, due to the pandemic, due to other issues, left employment. And we were not able to fill those positions because of needing to do a budget cut to be able to manage for FY22, and still anticipating that we were going to have a deficit. We currently have two full-time openings that we would like to be able to fill for July 1st, and the potential for a third as our numbers are continuing to increase. We've already served more students as of March 31st this year than we had the entire year last year.
But of the, you have 132 educators throughout the state?
Throughout the state.
And so I know you're looking for 3 more, but do you find that other areas have adequate staffing? Are they also struggling?
It's my understanding, and I will confirm this with my colleagues in my response back to you folks this afternoon, that we all have staffing vacancies that we really need to fill.
Thank you.
Great. Anything else? Okay. Terrific. I think we're going to leave it there. We'll look forward to a follow-up email. If you would send it to our committee assistant, Daphne, with just those budget numbers, as well as number of high school students, or students that received a high school diploma or GED. And the final thing, an additional 1.4 million, it would be great to pull that apart a little bit, just to give us a sense of how that would be spent, a little more detail. So that would be most welcome.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I will try to get that to you.
Thank you so much. It's great
Thank you
seeing
for your time today. Appreciate it.